I never thought a children's song would become a weapon. But when you share a wall with a raging alcoholic who beats his 85-year-old grandmother, you get creative. He thought he could scream. He thought he could intimidate. He didn't realize that every time he opened his mouth, Barney was waiting. If you believe some people deserve to be humbled in the most unexpected ways, hit like. And if you've ever dealt with a nightmare neighbor, subscribe, because this one escalated in a way I never saw coming. I love you. You love me. Those words used to mean absolutely nothing to me. Now they mean psychological warfare. I live in an old Victorian house that was converted into a duplex sometime in the 70s. The floors creak like they're telling secrets. The windows rattle when the wind picks up. The plumbing sighs in the walls like it's exhausted from decades of service. But it's home. I occupy half of the second floor. There's a narrow wooden staircase that smells faintly of old pine and dust. My balcony garden hangs over the backyard, rows of herbs, cherry tomatoes, a stubborn basil plant that refuses to die no matter how much I neglect it. I work from home. Always have. So quiet matters to me. Silence is currency. And for 5 years, this place was a bank vault. My neighbors? Great. Chill. Friendly but not invasive. We'd pass in the hallway, exchange small talk about the weather or whose package got misdelivered again. It was peaceful. Then they moved in. An elderly woman, mid-80s, tiny, white curls always pinned back with a pastel clip, and her grandson. The cats came first. 2 fluffy, ridiculously charming creatures that would press their faces against the window when I watered my plants. I liked them immediately. The grandson, not so much. He was a big guy. Thick neck. Shoulders like he'd swallowed a set of dumbbells. I later found out he used to box. His knuckles looked like they'd been in arguments before. The first red flag was the noise. Not just arguments. Explosions. Doors slamming so hard my picture frames rattled. Cabinets crashing. That sharp, ugly tone in someone's voice when they've crossed from frustration into something darker. And then the cops started showing up. The first time, I assumed it was a misunderstanding. The second time, maybe a domestic dispute blown out of proportion. By the 5th time, I stopped pretending. The grandson was hooked on kratom and drank like he was trying to dissolve himself from the inside out. I'd see him stumble up the stairs, keys scraping uselessly against the lock, muttering to himself. I tried to be patient. Everyone has their struggles, right? I'd hear him pacing at 2 a.m., his boots thudding overhead. Hear the grandmother's soft voice trying to calm him. It's okay, sweetheart. Let's just sit down. Sweetheart. That word made my stomach twist. One afternoon, I ran into her on the stairs. And that's when I saw it. A bruise blooming across her cheekbone. Deep purple fading into sickly yellow. Her eye slightly swollen. I froze. Oh, Mrs. H., what happened? She gave me the most rehearsed smile I've ever seen. Oh, I just walked into a door, she said lightly. Walked into a door. She weighed maybe 90 pounds. Looked like a strong gust of wind could knock her over. Her grandson was built like a freight train. My jaw tightened so hard it hurt. I wanted to confront him. I wanted to call someone. I wanted to do something. But she wouldn't admit it. And without her cooperation? It was complicated. A week later, he disappeared. Silence returned. No screaming. No boots stomping. No drunken slurring through the bathroom vent we shared, the cursed architectural flaw that let every sound travel like it was happening in my own apartment. I figured he was in jail. Or rehab. I didn't ask. I just enjoyed the peace. I'd sit on my balcony, morning sun warming my shoulders, coffee steaming in my hand, listening to birds instead of chaos. It felt like healing. And then, somehow, Palpatine returned. The day he came back, I knew before I saw him. The air changed. You know that feeling when a storm is building? Pressure shifts. Silence gets heavy. Then the yelling started again. Only this time, it was worse. Because now I knew what he was capable of. Every argument made my chest tighten. Every thud made me imagine her falling. Through the vent, I could hear everything. Their bathroom sat back to back with mine. If I stood still, I could make out full conversations. "You're useless," he'd scream. Her voice trembled. "I'm trying, honey." "Shut up." Sometimes there'd be silence afterward. And that silence was worse than the yelling. I started waking up anxious. My heart would race before my alarm even went off. I'd lie there listening, bracing. It's strange how someone else's chaos can invade your body. My shoulders were constantly tight. My jaw sore from clenching. I felt powerless. Until one morning, I snapped. I woke up to screaming again. Loud enough that my bedside lamp vibrated slightly. It was 7:12 a.m. I had meetings that day. I had deadlines. I had zero patience left. He was raging about money this time. Accusing her of hiding it. Calling her names I won't repeat. Something inside me shifted. I got up slowly. Walked into my bathroom. Looked at the vent. And an idea formed. Small. Petty. Perfect. I plugged in my Bluetooth shower speaker to make sure it had a full charge. Watched the little LED blink red, then blue. I opened Spotify. Searched. Queued it up. I placed the speaker directly against the vent. Turned the volume to maximum. And waited. Through the vent, I heard him inhale to start another tirade. And I pressed play. "I love you. You love me." The effect was immediate. "What the?" he barked. I didn't move. Just let it play. Barney's cheerful, relentless voice filled my bathroom. Echoed through the vent. Poured directly into his. The grandmother said nothing. He shouted, "Turn that crap off." I smiled. And hit repeat. The first time I played it, I expected him to storm over immediately. He didn't. That surprised me. Instead, there was this confused silence on the other side of the vent. Like his brain couldn't process what was happening. Barney just kept going. Bright. Cheerful. Relentless. "I love you. You love me. Turn it off," he roared. I didn't. I brushed my teeth slowly. Methodically. Like I couldn't hear him at all. The beauty of sharing a vent is that sound doesn't just travel. It wraps. It surrounds. It gets into corners. And children's music? It's engineered to burrow into your skull. He started pounding on something, probably the bathroom wall. The thudding vibrated faintly through my mirror. "You think this is funny?" he yelled. I finally spoke. Calm. Level. Measured. Just covering up the noise, I called back casually. "It's hard to work with all the yelling." Silence. Then a string of profanity so aggressive it almost impressed me. But the screaming stopped. And that was the first victory. The pattern begins. I didn't intend for it to become a system. But the next day, at 6:40 a.m., he started again. Same accusations. Same volume. Same fragile old voice trying to calm a hurricane. This time, I didn't hesitate. Speaker. Vent. Max volume. Play. I love you. It cut through him mid-sentence. He lost his mind. What is wrong with you? He shouted. I just let it loop. 3 times. 4. 5. Eventually, his yelling dissolved into frustrated pacing. And then, a door slammed. And silence. I stood there in my bathroom, heart pounding harder than I expected. My hands were shaking. It wasn't fear exactly. It was adrenaline. I had interrupted him. I had taken control of the soundscape. For someone who works from home, who values quiet like oxygen, that felt powerful. But there was something else under it. Anger. Hot. Heavy. Protective anger. Because every time he started up, I imagined her flinching. And if I couldn't step into that apartment and physically stop him, I could at least make sure he never enjoyed his rage again. He tests me. About a week in, he tried something new. Instead of yelling in the bathroom, he dragged the argument into the kitchen. At first, I couldn't hear them clearly. Then his voice rose. Louder. Louder. Until it bled into the vent again. He was testing the boundary. So I adapted. I moved the speaker to my kitchen vent. Cranked it. Same song. Same weapon. The effect was even better in the larger space. Barney's voice echoed through the ductwork like a possessed preschool teacher. I love you. A crash. Are you kidding me? He shouted. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. A grown man. Former boxer. Addicted. Violent. Being psychologically dismantled by a purple dinosaur. The confrontation. It happened 2 weeks in. I was watering my balcony plants when I heard the front door downstairs slam. Heavy footsteps hit the staircase. Fast. Too fast. My stomach dropped. He didn't knock. He pounded. 3 explosive hits against my door. Open up. I considered ignoring him. But I also knew something important about men like him. They thrive on intimidation. So I opened the door. Slowly. He filled the doorway. Red-faced. Jaw clenched. Breath sharp with alcohol even at noon. You think you're funny? He said. His voice was lower now. Controlled. That was worse. I think everyone deserves peace and quiet, I replied evenly. He stepped closer. Not inside, but enough that I could feel his heat. You don't get to mess with me. I'm not messing with you, I said. I'm protecting my workspace. If there's screaming, there's music. His eyes flickered. He hadn't expected that calm. He leaned in slightly. You don't know what goes on in there. I know enough. There it was. A flash of something dark in his expression. For a split second, I wondered if I'd pushed too far. Then one of the cats darted past his legs in the hallway, brushing against him. He startled. Actually startled. And something clicked in my brain. He was unstable. Loud. Violent. But unstable. And instability doesn't like unpredictability. Barney was unpredictability. You're insane, he muttered. Probably, I shrugged. See you around. And I closed the door. My heart was slamming so hard I had to lean against it. That was the first time I felt real fear. Because this wasn't anonymous anymore. He knew. But here's the thing. He didn't escalate physically after that. He couldn't. Because if he did, he knew I'd call the cops. And with his record already stacking up in this building, he couldn't afford it. So he tried something else. Psychological counterattack. He started blasting his own music. Heavy bass. Explicit rap. Loud enough to shake dust from my ceiling. At random hours. Midnight. 2 a.m. 5:30 a.m. It was retaliation. Sleep deprivation as punishment. The first night, I lay awake staring at my ceiling while the bass thumped like a mechanical heartbeat. I almost caved. Almost decided it wasn't worth it. But then I remembered the bruise. And I stayed still. The next morning, when he started yelling again, Barney returned. Louder. Longer. On repeat for 27 minutes. I timed it. By the third loop, he was screaming over it. By the fifth, he stopped trying. By the 10th, there was only Barney. And silence from him. The shift. Over the next month, something fascinating happened. His arguments got shorter. He'd start to escalate. Raise his voice. And then pause. Because he knew what was coming. I'd wait. Let him test it. The second he crossed into screaming. Play. It became Pavlovian. Rage equals dinosaur. Eventually, he started lowering his voice mid-argument. I could hear him hissing instead of shouting. The grandma's voice? Still soft. Still trembling sometimes. But no more explosive tirades. And that's when I realized something. This wasn't just petty revenge anymore. It was conditioning. I wasn't just annoying him. I was training him. And the thought was intoxicating. But peace never comes easy. Just when I thought I'd won. The cops came again. Only this time, it wasn't for yelling. It was for a noise complaint. Against me. I opened the door to two officers who looked tired before I even spoke. Ma'am, we've received a complaint about excessive noise. Children's music? I blinked. During daytime hours? They exchanged a glance. Look, one of them sighed, lowering his voice. We've been here before. We're aware of the situation upstairs. So they knew. That made something settle in my chest. I only play it when they're screaming, I said calmly. I work from home. I need quiet. The older officer rubbed his temple. Technically, during non-quiet hours, there's no violation. I nodded. So I'm good? He hesitated. Just, maybe keep it reasonable. I smiled faintly. I always do. They left. And 10 minutes later, through the vent, I heard him whispering. Whispering. Because he didn't want to trigger it. And that's when I knew. He hated it more than he hated losing control. He hated the humiliation. Because every time Barney blasted through that vent, it stripped him of intimidation. It turned his rage into a joke. And bullies? They cannot stand being laughed at. But he wasn't done. Not yet. Because a few nights later, I woke up to something worse than yelling. Crying, her crying. And no song was playing. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to quiet sobs through the vent. And for the first time since this started, I wondered if Barney was enough. The crying is what broke me. Not the screaming. Not the slamming doors. Not even the bruise. It was the quiet. Soft, fragile sobs drifting through the vent at 1:17 a.m., like they were too ashamed to exist out loud. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow shadows across my room, and I felt something heavy settle in my chest. Barney wasn't enough. I had managed to interrupt his explosions. I had trained him not to rage at full volume. But whatever was happening behind those lowered voices, it was still happening. And I hated that I couldn't see it. The next morning, I ran into her by the mailbox. She looked smaller than usual. Cardigan buttoned wrong. Hands shaking slightly as she sorted envelopes. "Morning," I said gently. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You've been busy with your music," she said, almost teasing. I swallowed. "Just trying to keep things calm." She hesitated. Then, very quietly, she said, "It helps." 2 words. It helps. That was the confirmation I didn't know I needed. This wasn't just noise retaliation anymore. It was interference. Disruption. A wedge in his behavior. And that's when my thinking shifted from reactive to strategic. Studying the enemy. If you've ever dealt with someone volatile, you learn quickly, their power comes from predictability in others. They know when you'll flinch. They know when you'll retreat. They know when you'll stay silent. I stopped being predictable. Instead of playing Barney immediately when he raised his voice, I'd wait sometimes. 10 seconds. 20. Let him think maybe I wasn't home. Let him relax into the cruelty. Then, "I love you." It hit harder when he thought he'd gotten away with it. Other days, I'd preempt him. If I sensed tension building, pacing, muttering, drawers slamming, I'd start the music before the yelling even began. Cut him off at the emotional knees. The unpredictability got to him. I could hear it in the way he moved. Less stomping. More restless pacing. Sometimes, through the vent, I'd hear him mutter, "She's insane, she's insane." And I'd smile quietly into my coffee. Maybe. But insanity, weaponized carefully, can be very effective. The expansion. Barney was powerful. But repetition builds immunity. So I diversified. One afternoon, while he was out, I made a playlist. The Barney theme. Baby Shark. The most aggressively cheerful versions of The Wheels on the Bus. A chipmunk remix of If You're Happy and You Know It. Songs engineered by corporations to be inescapable. Songs designed to melt adult sanity. I tested volume levels. Acoustics. Which vents carried sound best? Bathroom was direct fire. Kitchen was wide area coverage. Bedroom was low frequency bleed through. It felt absurd. And yet, precise. I wasn't just being petty. I was building a system. The close call. Then he tried something new. Silence. For 3 days, there was nothing. No yelling. No pacing. No muttering. Just eerie, unnatural quiet. It made my skin crawl. The 4th night, around 11 p.m., there was a knock on my door. Soft this time. Not pounding. I opened it cautiously. It was her. Alone. She held a small tin of cookies. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "For the music." I felt my throat tighten. "You don't have to." "I do," she insisted gently. "He leaves when it starts. Goes outside. Walks around the block." That hit me harder than I expected. He leaves. The music wasn't just annoying him. It was physically removing him from her space. "How are you?" I asked quietly. She paused. Looked down at her shoes. "He's my grandson," she said finally. "He wasn't always like this." That's the thing about abusers. There's always a before. But the before doesn't erase the now. "If you ever need help," I said carefully, "you can knock." She nodded. Then she left. And I stood there holding that tin of cookies like it weighed 100 pounds. Because now this wasn't anonymous warfare anymore. It was personal. Escalation attempt. The next week, he snapped. Not at her. At me. Through the vent. You think you're a hero? He shouted one morning. You think you're saving anyone? I didn't respond. I can hear you moving around in there, he continued. You're obsessed. That word lingered. Obsessed. Maybe I was. But obsession implies lack of control. This was controlled. Calculated. You're crazy, he yelled. I pressed play. Not Barney this time. Baby Shark. Full volume. He screamed in frustration. Actually screamed. And then something crashed. A door? A chair? My stomach dropped. I almost turned it off. Almost. But then I heard her voice. Calm. Steady. He's playing the song again. Why don't you go for a walk? Silence. Then heavy footsteps. The front door downstairs slammed. He left. Again. And in that moment, something crystallized in my mind. He wasn't just being annoyed. He was being displaced. The apartment, his stage for intimidation, was becoming hostile territory. Because every time he tried to dominate the space, it turned into a preschool. And that stripped him of power. The final adjustment. But I wanted something more lasting. So I did something subtle. I started timing patterns. He drank hardest on Fridays. Arguments peaked around late mornings. His worst moods followed phone calls, probably about money. So Fridays became extended play days. If he raised his voice even slightly, the playlist ran for an hour. No breaks. No mercy. One Friday afternoon, after 45 straight minutes of cheerful children's music echoing through the vents, I heard him shout something that made me stop smiling. I can't live like this. Good. That was the point. But then he added, she's ruining my life. And that's when I realized something profound. He didn't blame the music. He blamed me. Which meant he knew. Deep down. That his own behavior triggered it. And that awareness? That's the crack in the armor. The unexpected twist. 2 weeks later, the cops came again. But this time, they didn't knock on my door. They went upstairs. Voices. Movement. The metallic click of handcuffs. I stood frozen in my kitchen, barely breathing. Through the vent, I heard her say, I told you to stop. Stop what? More shuffling. Then footsteps down the stairs. I cracked my door open just in time to see him being let out. He didn't look angry. He looked exhausted. Defeated. As he passed my door, he glanced up. Our eyes met for half a second. There was no threat in his expression this time. Just resentment. And something else. Embarrassment. The squad car door shut. And for the first time in months, the house felt light. But I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Because I'd learned something about storms. Sometimes they circle back. And I didn't know if this was the end. Or just the eye. The squad car's taillights glowed red through the front window as they pulled away. I stood in my doorway long after the engine noise faded. The house felt hollow. Like a stage after the villain exits. No pacing upstairs. No muttering through the vents. No tension humming behind the drywall. Just silence. Real silence. The kind I used to take for granted. The aftermath. For 3 days, the apartment above mine stayed quiet. No footsteps except hers. No slammed doors. No drunken singing at 2 a.m. I kept expecting the storm to come back. I'd wake up in the morning and lie still, listening. Nothing. On the fourth day, I ran into her on the stairs again. She looked different. Not younger. Not magically healed. But lighter. Like someone had removed a backpack she'd been carrying for years. "He won't be coming back for a while," she said gently. I didn't ask for details. Didn't need them. She reached into her cardigan pocket and handed me something small. A folded sticky note. I opened it later in my kitchen. It said, "Thank you for the music." That was it. No grand speech. No dramatic confession. Just gratitude. And somehow that hit harder than anything else. The community notices. It didn't take long for the rest of the building to catch on. The downstairs neighbor stopped me by the mailboxes. "Things have been quieter lately," he said casually. "Yeah," I replied. He smirked. "We could hear the dinosaurs sometimes." I blinked. "You could?" "Oh yeah," he laughed. "Sound travels in this place." Honestly? It was hilarious. Hilarious. That word stuck with me. Because what had felt tense and strategic and borderline dangerous to me, to everyone else, it had sounded like a grown man losing to a children's playlist. The humiliation must have been unbearable. And humiliation is something men like him can't tolerate. Which is exactly why it worked. The final test. 2 weeks later, I heard footsteps upstairs again. He was back. Not permanently. Just visiting. My body reacted before my brain did. Heart racing. Jaw tight. Shoulders locking into place. I stood in my bathroom and stared at the vent. Waiting. For a while, there was nothing but low conversation. His voice sounded different. Quieter. Measured. Then it happened. A spike in volume. Just a little. Sharp. Irritated. I didn't hesitate. I didn't wait for escalation. I pressed play. "I love you." Silence upstairs. Immediate silence. No yelling. No protest. No pounding on my door. Just silence. Then, footsteps. Moving away from the bathroom. Toward the stairs. And the front door downstairs closing. He left. In under 30 seconds. I stood there, staring at my speaker like it had just performed a magic trick. That's when it hit me. It wasn't about the volume anymore. It wasn't about annoyance. It was conditioning. He had learned. Yelling equals humiliation. Rage equals exile. And his pride couldn't survive that equation. The emotional release. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine. The air was cool. The city hummed softly in the distance. My basil plant smelled sharp and green under my fingers. For months, I had carried tension in my body like armor. Always listening. Always bracing. And for the first time since he'd moved in, my shoulders weren't tight. My jaw didn't ache. I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to break. I felt calm. Not triumphant. Not gloating. Just steady. I never touched him. Never threatened him. Never crossed a legal line. I just removed his ability to dominate the space. I made rage inconvenient. Embarrassing. Public. And sometimes that's all it takes. What I learned. People like him rely on isolation. Closed doors. Muted walls. The assumption that no one will interfere. But the moment someone disrupts that bubble, even with something absurd, the illusion cracks. I didn't save the world. I didn't rescue her dramatically. I didn't become some neighborhood vigilante. I just refuse to be a silent bystander. And sometimes, resistance doesn't look like fists. Sometimes it sounds like a purple dinosaur. A few months have passed now. He doesn't live there anymore. She still does. The cats still press their faces against the window when I water my plants. The house is quiet again. But every now and then, when I scroll through my music app, that song pops up in my recommendations. I Love You by Barney. And I don't skip it. Because it reminds me of something important. You don't always need power to fight back. Sometimes you just need persistence, creativity, and the willingness to be a little unhinged for the right reasons. He thought he could scream without consequence. He learned that every action has an echo. And in his case, the echo sang back, I love you. You love me. If you've ever dealt with someone who thought they owned the silence around them, drop a comment and tell me how you handled it. And if you believe even small acts of resistance matter, hit subscribe. Because sometimes, justice doesn't roar. Sometimes, it sings.